Hey folks, and welcome back to another Division 2 video. In this one, I'm going to go over the current skill build I've been using for those easy, lazy farming sessions. Let's jump into it. So recently, I've switched things up with my resource farming. I usually prefer to play with a high DPS rifle or assault rifle build. You know, an offense is the best defense kind of thing. But with a lot of my builds playing the same way, it did start to feel a little repetitive, so I decided to dust off a build that I've often referred to as the Pokemon build. And I've been having a lot of fun with it being a build and playstyle that takes me back to soloing legendaries in the Division 1. I know you old school agents remember the good old tactician builds. So anyway, I thought this would be a great time to put out a video on this skill build and a couple of variations. I'll be honest, when I use this build, I find my mission clear times are not quite as fast as my usual all-red shooting gun style builds, but it does make clearing content a breeze. This makes it the perfect build for anyone just getting into the endgame and maybe still struggling a little bit with heroic missions or control points, or anyone who's looking to play slightly more passively while watching a film or maybe a little YouTube. Which reminds me, if you are new to the channel and haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe for more content and give this video a like because, well, come on, that was a pretty good segue. Going through this video, I'm going to break the build down into the gear, the weapons, skills, spec, and talk a bit about the playstyle along the way, so let's get into the build, starting with the gear pieces, attributes and talents. And like in all my build videos, I know we don't all play the same, so I will be throwing out a few alternative pieces that can shape the build differently and alter the playstyle of the build depending on how you want to play it. For the mask, I'm using an Empress International mask, giving us the one-piece brand bonus of 10% skill health. And for the attributes, I have skill tier for the core attribute, and skill haste and skill damage for the minor attributes. I also have a skill haste mod in the mod slot. On the chest, I'm using another Empress piece, giving us the second brand set bonus of 10% skill damage. And just like with the mask, I have skill tier for the core attribute, and skill haste and skill damage for the minor attributes, with more skill haste in the mod slot. For the talent here, there are a few options, but I've gone with Glass Cannon, because if you've seen any of my other build videos, you'll know I'm a fan of instant burst damage. Glass Cannon. All damage is amplified by 25%. All damage you take is amplified by 50%. The beauty of this is that Glass Cannon applies to all damage. This includes your skills, meaning your skills are getting an extra 25% amplified damage, which is multiplicative damage. And unlike most damage builds, your character is much more out of harm's way, so as long as you play smart with your positioning, the increased damage you take isn't that much of a problem. If you aren't a fan of Glass Cannon, because I know quite a few players who aren't, I always like to give alternatives, so you can also go with Kinetic Momentum as another option for a damage talent. Kinetic Momentum. When in combat, each skill generates a stack while active, or not on cooldown. Stacks increase your total skill damage by 1%, and total skill repair by 2%, up to 15 stacks per skill, lost when on cooldown. Now, not long back there was a big debate through the Division 2 community about these two chest talents for skill builds, and I don't really want to get back into it, but Buzz actually did a great video comparing these two talents, concluding that really, the difference in damage is quite minimal. If you'd like to check out Buzz's video on the topic, I will link that in the description below. Personally, I've always preferred Glass Cannon between the two for two reasons. Like I said, it's instant damage. There is no need to wait for any stacks to build, which means you're taking advantage of the full damage increase from the moment you enter combat without having to wait for stacks to build. With Kinetic Momentum, for the beginning of the fight, you're only getting 1% extra damage, then 2% extra damage, and so on all the way up to 15 stacks. Glass Cannon gives you the full 25% the moment you throw the skill. And also, unlike Kinetic Momentum, Glass Cannon also applies to your weapons. And I've always preferred a slightly more active playstyle, even with a skill build, popping up and maybe emptying a magazine or two, which will also help out with a few other talents as we get more into the build. The only time I'd actually go with Kinetic Momentum over Glass Cannon is if I wanted to be able to switch my skills and throw a few heals around, but really, personally, that's the only time. Now, there is also a third option for the chest talent, which is less about damage and more about utility, and that is skilled. Skill kills have a 25% chance to reset skill cooldown. And with an Empress chest, we also have the option of having the perfect version from the Caesar's Guard named piece, changing the chance from 25 to 30%. I feel like skilled is a bit of an underdog of a skilled talent, but I've had a lot of fun with it during those missions where you need to move fast and damage isn't an issue, giving you a good chance that you'll always have your skills ready to go. But when it comes to flat out damage across skills and weapons, for this build I'm going to stick with Glass Cannon. For the holster, I have a Wyvernware holster, which gives us the one-piece brand bonus of 10% skill damage. And for the attributes, I have skill tier for the core again, and for the minor attributes, we have skill haste and skill damage. For the backpack, I have the named Hanayu backpack Force Multiplier that gives the build perfect combined arms. Shooting an enemy increases total skill damage by 30% for 3 seconds. This plays into, like I said earlier, the fact that I like to shoot guns, even with a skill build, for a more active playstyle. If you don't have the Force Multiplier, you can farm this from missions, control points, and the open world in the light zone if you look for Hanayu or backpack targeted loot while you're farming. Or you can just throw on a normal Hanayu backpack with the standard version of combined arms. This will only give you 5% less skill damage compared to the named counterpart. But if you prefer a more, let's not say lazy, let's go with passive playstyle for a skill build, there is another option, and that's tech support. Skill kills increase total skill damage by 25% for 20 seconds. Tech support is a much more easygoing passive talent that only really requires you to throw out a skill, grab a drink, and put up your feet. While combined arms requires you to pop out every few seconds and let off a few rounds, tech support is only reliant on your skills getting the kill, which, at skill tier 6, is going to happen. I quite like tech support over combined arms when I'm farming for a certain piece of gear for quite a while, and maybe I'm watching something on the other monitor, because you don't have to pay quite as much attention. For the gloves, I'm using a pair of Hanayu gloves, which gives us the second brand set bonus of 10% skill damage, and continuing the trend, we have skill haste and skill damage for the minor attributes. But for the core attribute, we have a few options. For a more aggressive playstyle with talents like combined arms and glass cannon, here we can actually roll weapon damage to make sure we get a little extra damage for our weapons. Or if you want a more relaxed playstyle with talents like tech support, adding armor here will increase your survivability and can also offset some of that extra damage if you decide to go with glass cannon over kinetic momentum. And finally for gear, on the knees I have a pair of Empress International knee pads for the third brand bonus of 10% skill efficiency. A rare attribute that is not to be overlooked. Like weapon handling, skill efficiency is actually a combination of different attributes all rolled into one. So the 10% skill efficiency actually gives us 10% skill damage, 10% skill haste, 10% skill duration, 10% skill health, 10% repair skill, and 10% status effect. So whenever I put together a skill build, I always start with 3 pieces of Empress International, because as well as all of the above, we also get the extra 10% skill damage and health from the first 2 brand set bonuses, which gives us a very solid base for a skill build. And I know so far that's only 5 skill tiers, but we are going to get the 6th from our specialization, which we will go over shortly. Let's move on to the weapons. For the primary, I'm running the exotic assault rifle, the Capacitor, which comes with 51.7k base damage and 103.4k with this build. It also has 700 RPM or rounds per minute, a magazine size of 40 rounds, and for the weapon attributes it comes with assault rifle damage, damage to armor, and health damage. The talent that the Capacitor comes with is Capacitance. Shooting enemies builds stacks up to a cap of 40. Each stack grants 1.5% skill damage. After 5 seconds, stacks decay 1 per second. For each skill tier, gain 7.5 weapon damage. This means that shooting and hitting enemies up to 40 times gives us up to 60% skill damage, which we can maintain by landing a few shots every few seconds. This synergizes really well with talents like combined arms. Building the stacks will also be proccing that talent, giving us the 60% skill damage from the Capacitor and the 30% from combined arms. We also passively get 7.5% weapon damage per skill tier just for having the weapon equipped, which means with 6 skill tiers we're getting an extra 45% weapon damage, which goes into the overall damage of the build, buffing the shots fired to proc combined arms and build the stacks for the skill damage from the capacitor. For the mods on the capacitor we're getting an extra 10% crit chance, plus 11 rounds in the magazine, 30% crit damage, and 10% weapon handling from the grip. If you don't have a capacitor, you can get one yourself by going to the summit and completing a few challenges. But until then, a good substitute is any assault rifle with in sync on it, or the named assault rifle test subject, which comes with perfectly in sync. Hitting an enemy grants 20% skill damage for 5 seconds, using a skill or damaging an enemy with a skill grants 20% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Damage increases are doubled while both buffs are active at the same time. The standard version of InSync works the exact same way, except the damage increases are 15%, not 20%. In the secondary slot I'm using the named assault rifle, the Mechanical Animal. This comes with 50.8k base damage, 78.7k damage with this build, an RPM of 720, and a magazine size of 50 rounds. For the attributes, it comes with assault rifle damage and health damage fixed, and I've rolled damage to targets out of cover for the third attribute. The talent the Mechanical Animal comes with is the perfect version of Perfect Future, Future Perfection. Weapon kills grant +1 skill tier for 19 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. Weapon kills at skill tier 6 grant overcharge for 15 seconds, overcharge cooldown 90 seconds. Now the reason I run this weapon as a secondary is for the last part of the talent. Weapon kills at skill tier 6 grant overcharge for 15 seconds. And this will turn our skills into buzzsaws for 15 seconds, and it is very powerful. When this isn't on cooldown, I watch for any enemies on low health and get the killing blow and just watch the chaos. You can actually use either the perfect version or the standard version of this talent, with that last part being unchanged between the two. I just tend to use the Mechanical Animal because I have a good roll and we don't really have to worry about weapon damage here. And I just kind of like how the weapon handles and feels. But if you want to be optimal, I'd recommend going with either the FAMAS or the classic M1A for a much higher damage output. For the mods on my secondary, I have crit chance everywhere except for the magazine, where I have plus 20 rounds at the cost of minus 10% reload speed on the sturdy extended mag. And really for the pistol, you can use anything you want, with this not really being a weapon slot I use often with this build, but there are a few pistol talents I would recommend. Like InSync, so if you manage to run out of ammo in your primary and secondary, you can still switch to your pistol and use InSync to buff your skills. Or you can use Preservation, which repairs your armor over time on kill, which can be a nice way of getting a little bit of armor back if you're in a tight spot. Let's move on to the skills, because really these are the stars of the show for this build and where the majority of the damage is coming from. First, I'm using the Assault Turret at skill tier 6 with damage, health and skill haste for the mods. The turret's going to be used to be thrown into the spot with the best view of the area and just lay down heavy damage. You can actively target NPCs by looking in their direction and pressing the button you use to throw the turret, if anyone is getting a little bit too close for comfort. And for the next skill and more bullets, we have the Striker Drone. The drone does less damage than the turret, but is significantly more mobile, which makes the drone's job to chase enemies and generally just be a pest while doing damage and getting NPCs out of cover and into the sight of the turret for much bigger damage. Just like with the turret, you can actively aim the drone if there's a target that needs more attention or is just being a bit of a pain and needs to be brought down a peg. Moving on to the Specialization, and like I said earlier, this is where we're getting our 6th skill tier from, which means you may have guessed we're going with the Technician Specialization. With this spec, we get an extra skill tier passively, which is what lets us use either weapon damage or an armor core attribute on the gloves for a more flexible build. With the Technician, we also get an extra 10% skill damage, 12% damage to drones, skills and other robotics, and we can also give other members of our squad shock and disrupt immunity if they're within 5 meters of our drone or turret. The Technician is a very versatile spec and definitely brings a lot to the table for skill builds. Just make sure to roll your weapon damage to the correct weapon archetypes for what you've decided to go with, which for me is primarily assault rifles. At this point in the build video, I usually like to go over how the playstyle of the build works, but with this skill build it's actually pretty flexible, which is the reason going through a few parts, I've offered alternative talents that change how the build plays, and how active you have to be while playing the build. And honestly, I switch these talents around myself because sometimes it's fun just to change things up. Really, it's best to look at a build like this as a template and take what you like and alter other areas depending on how you want to play. And that's the build and everything for this video. If you've watched all the way to this point, you are awesome. And if you enjoyed this video, giving it a like helps other agents find it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. So what kind of builds are you running at the moment? Skill? Status effect? Good old run and gun? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.